name is Julia. I'm CEO and co-founder of ESLab. And today we are in Paris at Change Now, the largest event for the solutions for the planet. In this podcast series, we are exploring intersection of climate tech and women's leadership. And today, specifically, we focus on investing in climate tech, navigating opportunities and challenges. Our guest today is Helena Wasserman, who is a business angel into climate tech and also founder of a climate accelerator. And Helena is on a mission to empower 1 million climate founders to fix the climate change. Hi, Helena. Thank you very much for being here today with me on our podcast, especially with you being so busy and so many panels scheduled. And I know you have to run soon. So let's dive right into it.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So, of course, you have a very ambitious goal to empower 1 million climate founders. And this is just, wow, the number is amazing. So, of course, naturally, my question is, how do you plan to do that? And how do you think society overall, all the stakeholders can contribute to that?
That's a good question. So first of all, it's nice to have big goals in the millions, I find. It's more motivating. So you always need a big goal. That may seem unachievable, but it's not. And the reality is right now we have such a big climate emergency that you're seeing a lot of extremely talented people from technology that have, exited businesses before that now are, decided to start climate tech companies. And it's amazing to have seen so much talent coming to climate over the last few years. So, 10 years ago, I was working at the Clinton Foundation. And back then, impact was mostly driven by the nonprofit and the public sector. Yep. Well, today, because there's obviously an emergency and the market is ready, there's now a lot more founders starting companies in climate. So I think it's definitely possible.
Nice. Sounds very good. And so, of course, we'll be jumping into climate tech right away. And what does motivate yourself specifically to invest into climate tech? And what do you think are the most promising solutions or areas in climate tech to invest into?
So I think what we've seen historically, so obviously this is the second wave of clean tech, which we've rebranded to climate tech. The first wave, as you know, didn't go so well. Lots of investors lost money, but because the technologies were not ready yet, it took time to lower the cost of these technologies, etc. Today, so it's a second wave. It's only been a few years. And I'm seeing, the sector moving fast. I'm seeing there's been obviously a lot of capital has gone into, batteries, into transportation, mobility. That's obviously been the verticals that have been the most well-funded over the last few years. But there's other verticals like biodiversity, like circularity, that are still, in need of funding. And I think are slowly going to mature so they're going to be as well-funded as mobility and batteries. So those are two specifically that excite me, especially the biodiversity one as well, which until now has been mostly funded by, again, nonprofit and government. Still is the case. But we're going to see much more funding, biodiversity, nature-based solutions. Investors are going to be focusing on that more and more. And what's exciting is I'm seeing also new generation of investors that are looking at return a little differently, that are looking at, instead of thinking of, okay, how do we build a unicorn as fast as possible? They think about how do we build a healthy business, $100 million revenue, but really restoring nature. Yeah. And so I'm seeing this new generation of investors emerging that kind of see growth differently, which I find particularly exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely what climate tech needs, and this green tech and everything. So how would you describe the whole climate in the climate tech in terms of funding and investors? Are there more investors? How do they look like? What is the profile of this investor who specifically targets, green tech and climate tech, as you mentioned?
Well, there's obviously, the typical, more like tech VC investors that have also focused on some of their verticals in climate. Then there's obviously investors that come more from development, like the World Bank, that are more catalytic investors that have a longer return horizon. And then there's obviously angels like myself that have more freedom in how they deploy their capital, that can also move faster because it's based on their own decisions. So I would say these are the three buckets. Private equity, still there are some investors, but it's still early days because obviously most of climate tech companies nowadays are less than 5 years old. So we're still seeing a very young sector. But as the sector matures, we're going to see more deals at private equity and IPO level. I think in Europe last year we had 2 IPOs, climate tech IPOs. And this year there are 10 companies that are being on the watch list of potential.
So going higher.
Exactly.
Nice. So let's look into the founders in the climate tech. How do you think, what are the barriers or challenges that they might face, those founders, while founding the climate or green tech and developing that?
Well, if we look at how do we build a healthy climate tech ecosystem, right now we're seeing a lot of funding at seed stage, but there's a bit of a gap at Series A, Series B. So I think we need more investors there because it's a young market, a lot of investors at seed, but a little bit less later stage. So I think that's going to be needed to make sure that these startups are able to grow beyond seed to Series A, Series B, etc., and find investors along the way. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for investors to enter the market at Series A and Series B.
Nice. So when I was raising our investment round, one of the goals was to actually show investors that we are not as risky or show how we are going to mitigate the risks. So I would say, what is your approach to mitigating the risks at the early stage startups, especially in climate tech? It's, as you said, it takes it takes more time to build a venture that is in the climate tech. You need to look into it differently. So how do you think investors can actually mitigate those or look into those risks for them?
Well, I think there's ways in which to find capital that might be a little less risky. So not only equity but also debt. To work with that to extend your runway. If you need more time to hit the targets that you need to get bigger investors, bigger equity investors. So playing a little bit with debt, even grants, all the help you can get to extend your runway. I think is a good way. And then I think overall I think there's less risk in the market because the market has matured and because there's also more support from policy, right? And as we know, private capital usually follows public capital. So as soon as you see the government stepping in, like in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, that gives confidence to private investors that the government is here to step in, that they're going to support with programs, with subsidies, with grants, etc. And so that automatically gives confidence to private sector investors, and it's a typical way of working. So I think that also de-risks climate tech for private investors.
Sounds good. So let's look into the gender balance of the climate tech. As you said, it's your favorite topic, mine as well. So how do you see the gender balance in the climate tech specifically? Is it different from the whole industry of startups, of tech industry? Do you see any specifics in the gender, how it approaches the gender balance?
Yes. So I think there still needs some research to properly back the anecdotes that I have to share. But I have heard some facts. One is that out of the 600 climate tech startups that were launched in India since the beginning of the year, 40% of them are female founded.
Nice.
So that's in India. And then I know as well, again, anecdotes, but I know, I'm connected to a lot of chief sustainable officers on LinkedIn in big corporations. And 90% of the chief sustainability officers are women. Yeah. So, I think that's also a fact. And then I think just in general, I think women, we are wired to care about community, about the environment, about the future, and so it's a very natural area for us to work in, right?
Yep.
It comes very naturally to think about our future generations and our families and our children and our brothers and sisters and the planet. So it's such a natural area for us as women to work in.
Yeah, 100% to fix what was kind of damaged a bit. So at the same time, clearly we see that there are many or more female founders in the climate tech. At the same time, only 2% of the funding goes to female founders. So do you see that there is a difference in climate tech in terms of, actually investing into female founders? Or do you think it's still the same situation? Or is it, like better for female to be a founder in climate tech?
Well, I think we still have, as we said, only 2% of funding goes to women. That's VC funding. So obviously we have a long way to go. The good news, we're seeing a lot of new funds emerging that are specifically backing women and that just have, women as partners. So obviously that makes a difference. And then I do think that I'm seeing, more. We also launched a program called Unstoppable Women specifically, to support female climate founders and professionals for that reason, because it is true that they're having more difficulty raise capital. So, for example, I have a friend who's a female startup founder, and she says that she always, to make sure that fundraising meetings go well, she always has to bring a man in the room with her. And that does make a difference. So we still have a long way to go, right? But things are changing, and I think that's encouraging.
Nice. That definitely sounds really encouraging. And also, when I was raising the round, the CEO for our company, I also sometimes had to bring a man to be in the room. So it's not an anecdote, it's reality. But that's fine. But I still also see the shift towards supporting climate tech startups, no matter what gender is on the company. So you mentioned that there are barriers in the funding for female entrepreneurs. Are there any other challenges that you see specifically related to founders being a woman?
Well, I think obviously, women have been used to, taking, time off to take care of their children, etc. And I think they need to be rewarded for that, and we need to just normalize it. But I think these things are changing as well. I'm seeing a lot of friends who are female founders that are doing an amazing job at doing both. And I think it's just becoming more and more normalized to have exceptional women in the marketplace as founders, as professionals. And so I think this is, slowly changing.
Good. So maybe we will wrap up, and I will just ask you to give some couple of advice to those who are going to fund something in climate tech, maybe for female entrepreneurs as well. Like maybe you have an overall advice that you would, kind of steps how to achieve your goal, and like to make sure that your startup is successful, that it's getting funding, that you're getting customers. What would be your take on that?
Yeah, I would say, starting a company can be very lonely. So, don't isolate yourself. Join lots of networks, get mentors, work side by side with other co-founders and just other startups in general, because obviously starting a company and building a company is lonely, but the reality is there's so many founders out there that are going through exactly the same thing. And that's also why Unstoppable is also our company is also based as a community, because we have weekly support from others, just sharing where we're at, etc. And I think that makes a big difference, not only to be successful but also to enjoy the ride, right? To feel that you're not alone and that you can share lessons with others.
So well said. Enjoy the ride. Thank you very much, Helena, for being with us today. Thank you for all your insights, and have a great conference at Change Now.
Thank you, Julia. It was really fun to be with you.